the more you're repetitive and consistent with those same exact topics, the brand or the individual might feel like a broken record saying the same thing over and over. But I find, what is it? People need to hear something 7 times before they
Yes.
remember it. So I found the more you can kind of repeat yourself in different ways and creative ways, the better traction you get.
What does it really mean to be a thought leader in B2B? That's what we're here to find out. This is the Notorious Thought Leader, a podcast for B2B marketers who want to generate demand by creating content that builds credibility and thought leadership. In each episode, Erin Balsa helps demystify thought leadership and uncovers how companies are using thought leadership to generate demand. Let's get started.
My guest today is Laura Fravel, an award-winning storyteller who transforms experts into recognized thought leaders. Thanks for being here today, Laura.
It's great. Thanks. And it's great to be here.
I'm so excited to chat because, your resume is really impressive, and I really truly believe that
Oh,
our listeners can learn a lot from you. So
thank
you've
you.
helped executives from companies like Adidas and Techstars, and you've also led trainings for the Warner Brothers Discovery Global Leadership Team. And since you have such deep expertise in this area, I'm excited to hear you answer my flagship question. So, in your own words, what the fuck is thought leadership?
I love that question. I think thought leadership is really being an expert, having, really grounded, amazing experience in your field and putting your ideas, your thoughts, your perspective out into the world. So I don't think you have to be the leading expert. I don't think you have to have it all figured out. I think part of thought leadership is a lot about sparking conversation.
Sparking conversations, sharing your expertise, and just getting it out there and not being afraid to share your expertise. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I
Oh,
think that's when we keep our knowledge to ourselves, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. So, you reach a certain point in your career or you've gained knowledge in your industry, if you're not sharing it, to spark that conversation, to spark change, to spark innovation. That to me is what thought leadership is all about.
I talk to a lot of people who really want to push their subject matter experts and their executives to start sharing their expertise and build that thought leadership muscle. But some are really hesitant. So I'm just curious, do you ever run into this, or are the clients who sign up to work with you ready to start sharing?
I don't think there is a single client I work with who doesn't have that hesitation, honestly. There's many people ready to share their thoughts. They want to share their thoughts, but often one of the biggest things holding them back is just overwhelm of, oh my gosh, where do I even start? What do I say? And I think that's part of it. The fear is not having a real clear focus on what they want to share, what impact they want to make. And I think when you get clear on that, it really does help. But yes, to answer your question, I think it is. I think the corporate world, especially if you've been in the corporate world a while, we've been raised to act and speak and be in this corporate box. And I think times have completely changed, especially since COVID. It's just like, fast forward. And I think we're, consumers, the world is demanding, employees are demanding a lot more of our leaders, our experts, and they want to hear their perspectives and opinions and authenticity and a little bit of vulnerability. And it's really hard, I think, for people who have been in the corporate world for a long time to step out of that box that they've been trained to be in.
For sure. I hear the same things all the time. And, just to kind of double click on what you said. So, one of the reasons people are experts and many times senior leaders are kind of afraid or apprehensive to share, they aren't clear on their focus. Like, what should I even talk about? What's going to be interesting to people? And then they're not clear on like, what impact is this even going to have? And those are two things that I also hear all the time. And it takes vulnerability just to let yourself be seen and to potentially get people pushing back on what you're saying. And that can be, scary to some people. So, with these three kind of common, very common issues, when you're working with clients, how do you help them overcome the getting a clear focus, understanding that it's going to make an impact, and then helping them push through those feelings of apprehensiveness so that they allow themselves to be vulnerable?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think it really does start, like you said, with gaining that clarity on, what is my voice? What do I want to put out there? What do I really want to focus on? Which a lot of times comes to, what in your industry lights you up? What gets you excited? That when we lean into the things we're good at and passionate about, that energy is contagious. It comes through. So, and that's where authenticity comes in. So, when I begin with a client, it is just a deep dive. I spent a long time a couple decades in the TV media world, so I kind of pull from a lot of my interview and kind of coaching skills from that of, helping people open up and asking the deeper questions. And this is where I think it is hard to do ourselves. I mean, even I've struggled with it myself. It's having that outside sounding board, someone who can hear those nuggets that really jump out or where we get excited. So yeah, that's the first step is just doing a deep dive and getting really clear on what impact you want to have. What is my thought leadership want to why do I want to build thought leadership? What's the goal behind it? And what's going to light me up and get me there? So
I love
that's the first step.
I love the light me up and what you're passionate about because, you know, the last few years, anyone who spent any time on LinkedIn listening to some of the LinkedIn gurus, they're always telling you to take a stance against something. And, this whole anti what you're against kind of category has really become saturated. And sometimes it can feel,
Yeah.
even off LinkedIn, especially on other sites like Twitter, which I try to spend zero time on because people are just angry there and I don't like it, but, like, everyone's so angry and so against things, and I had, a guest named Devin Bramhall on the show, and she made a great point. She's like, "The anti-category is so saturated. Tell me what you're for. Like, show me a realistic vision of a positive future and tell me critically and concretely, how do I get there? That's what's gonna get me interested. Just hearing you rant and rave and saying, I want a 4-day work week and I want to get paid twice as much. And she said, well, that's great, but like, do the math. How does that work out?
Yeah.
And I really like the idea to really lean into your passions and show people a positive view of the future. So that feels good to me.
I think
Sometimes
that
I can go anti, but I feel like it's too much. It's too saturated.
yeah, or have it you can make it a combination. I think our world actually needs a lot more inspiration now, and this might be a slight tangent, but I mean, look at I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso TV show. That is all positivity. It's a leader who is all about positivity, what we'd normally say is cheesy, and people are eating it up right now.
Hmm.
So and you can also look on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and there's some people who are all inspirational, and they're probably getting just as many likes in the thousands, and engagement as some of the anti people. So
True.
I think there's a need for both
True. And
with balance.
honestly, it's just the inverse, right? You can take what you're against and flip it, and then you have what you're for. So
Right.
there's definitely the yin and the
Exactly.
yang.
And I think it really comes down to what's authentic to you. If it's
Hmm.
not gonna be authentic, ranting and raving and doing, I'm against. If that's your personality and how you want to push forth, change and spark conversation, then go for it. I think it just has to be authentic or it doesn't come across nearly as powerful.
That's such a great point. And I agree. But I need to know. So you had
Yeah.
10 years in media and TV broadcasting experience, which is so interesting to me. And I can just picture, in the studio working with guests, maybe guests who have never been on camera before. And you talked about those skills that you have these transferable skills that you use now when working with these experts at companies and corporations. And you're using those skills to help them open up and let themselves be vulnerable and be comfortable. Could you share maybe something that you learned in your media days that you use today to help executives and experts open up?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so I worked in it was documentary news journalism. So I was dealing it wasn't, fictional Hollywood Ted Lasso script writing type. So it was dealing with real people and really it was all about asking the right questions to get at the right time to get people to open up and feel comfortable. I think that's first and foremost. You have to make, in the media days when I'm interviewing something, you have to make them feel safe and comfortable in the environment if you're going to ask them personal questions and you've just met them. So that's definitely a skill. And I think one of the things just executives, leaders, thought leaders can take away is, in the media and TV world, we would sit in an edit room and, we would have shot hours and hours of footage and it has to be cut down to, that 30-minute show, which actually was only like, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So you had to find that one through line. And if anything didn't support that through line, it went on the cutting floor. So it could be the funniest thing that happened, but if it doesn't help support that through line, you got to let it go. And I think that's the same when we as thought leaders are telling our story and our expertise out into the world. We have so much knowledge and so much information and cool tidbits and stories, but you got to really think about what do I stand for? What's that one thing I want to drive home? And really kind of stick to that storyline, that through line. That's when it's most powerful.
Yeah. And, in the writing world and content, we have a phrase for that. It's called killing your darlings. And it's when you write this glorious, article or op ed or
Yeah,
whatever it is, and it's too long. And you're kind of not telling a concise story. So you need to edit out 500 words maybe. And it's really hard because you're in love with most of these words and you think they're really witty and it's great. But what good is
I
witty and
know.
great if you're detracting from the main story that you're trying to communicate?
Exactly. Yes. And I
And
think we do have so many of these great ideas, like I said, in little stories and snippets floating through our head that it sometimes takes that outside perspective to help you hone it in, just like a lot of writers have editors and such.
yeah, so kind of when I'm thinking about working with a new client and building a content strategy, I'm always thinking about kind of what topical pillars are really, really important to them. So a lot of times I'm not
Absolutely.
necessarily working with a single person on thought leadership. I'm more working with the brand to help the company and the brand become a thought leader within their space, right? So it's very similar, but also kind of different. But I always start with these kind of critical pillars that map to their positioning and their product and kind of build out a content strategy based on those pillars. So is that similar when you're working with an individual?
Oh, absolutely. I do the exact same thing. It's coming up with their kind of content pillars or talking points. It's, and you probably find this too, it's like guardrails to help them know what to talk about, whether it be a brand or an individual. They just help guide them of what am I talking about? What points am I driving home? It even helps the individual, when you sit down to write a talk or
Yeah.
write social media posts if they're doing it themselves or even if they're having someone else do it like yourself, it just gives them a starting place that really helps.
How do you
And
Oh, go ahead.
well, I'm curious if you find the same. The more you're repetitive and consistent with those same exact topics, the brand or the individual might feel like a broken record saying the same thing over and over. But I find, what is it? People need to hear something 7 times before they
Yes.
remember it.
Yep.
So I found the more you can kind of repeat yourself in different ways and creative ways, the better traction you get.
Yes. And if it's on social media, you can't control whether or not the individual that you're get trying to hopefully get in front of actually even saw your post. So
Right.
you could say the same thing, of course, in 10 different ways, but 10 times.
Yeah.
And you could have the same person in their feed and they might only see two of those posts. So it's not like they're actually reading all 10 all the time, unless They really love you and they've kind of rung your bell to bookmark you, and then they do see every single thing you see. But in that case, they love you enough to ring your bell and they're not going to mind.
And they're probably still every notification they get, they're probably still not going into your feed every single time.
True.
You
True,
never
true,
know.
true. So, thinking back on the different people that you've helped over the years,
Mhm.
what attributes do the most successful thought leaders have in common, if any?
What a great question. I think it's courage.
Mm,
You know, not everybody has the confidence to put themselves out there, but it's those who, well, I think it's twofold. I think it's those who really want to lean into their purpose and make an impact. There's a motivation behind it, and that impact can be, you know, I want my company to do better. I want to scale my company. It can be, I want to spark innovation in my water industry. It could be, I want to change the world or bring social justice, issue to light. It can be any one of those things, but when they have a purpose and really lean into that, I think it's a driving motive factor. And then that helps build the courage to actually just start putting their ideas out there.
so true, because if the mission is bigger than yourself, even if you don't feel like it that day, or even if you don't feel courageous that day, you can kind of
Yep.
put yourself in the back seat and put your mission first.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
makes a
that's
lot
why
of
I kind of go
sense.
back to, when you're building that personal brand and your thought leadership platform, what is it that lights you up? And really leaning into that because, that makes your purpose more meaningful, enjoyable. You start to have fun doing it. Your
Mhm.
personality comes out. Because I think that's the other thing with thought leadership is it doesn't have to be all dry information, sharing your expertise. People really want to see the human behind a business these days, those faces. So they want to see your personality. That's how you're going to connect with people. That's how you're going to build trust, more trust faster.
Yeah, for sure. It's that authenticity piece and that vulnerability piece. And it's so funny that you said both of those two words a few different times today. So I have a newsletter every 2 weeks, or it goes out if I manage to get it out. Sometimes, I do my best. And it was
Same here.
funny because sometimes people will reply and it's so beautiful, the messages that they're willing to share, privately. And that's one thing they say, like, I just feel so connected to you. Like your stuff comes across so authentic and it gives me so much confidence. And I feel like I have this like big sister. It's really amazing the kind of connections that you can build with people. And you might not really know them, right? Because they're consuming your content every day on social media. They're consuming your content every time they listen to you on a podcast or every time they read your newsletter. So they might have had 100 interactions with you. And the more authentic you deliver your story, and your thoughts and your POV, the more they have the chance to really develop this deep kind of emotional bond with you. And you might not even realize it's happening. And that's the thing that executives might not see, especially if they don't manage their own inbox. They might not see all of these messages from people who, their message really is helping people. And it's not just helping their mission, whether that's their company mission or their personal mission. And of course, thought leadership helps with both. It's actually helping in a really beautiful sense. It's helping individuals.
Oh, it is. I
Yeah.
completely agree. Like getting those messages, like response from your newsletter are always just heartwarming.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard thing with thought leadership is you're putting your ideas and perspectives out there. Like you said, people are consuming it, but you don't always get the feedback or the validation of what's working or not right away.
Mhm.
It's a little bit more of a long game, but when you do, it's yeah, priceless. And yes, there's sorry, on your point about the helping thought leadership isn't just helping the individual, it's helping the business.
Yeah.
I don't know if you seen the Edelman thought leadership study that's
Mhm.
come out, which has amazing statistics
Yep.
on how much it helps the business as a whole.
Oh my god, totally. And it helps, what I see like concretely in my own experience with my clients. If you put out some, an original report or you have a podcast and you have all these like amazing insights from CFOs, if that's your ICP, and you use those to shape your talk track when you go out on the speaking circuit that year. And you're able to, like you said, repeat this narrative, have these data points and these expert insights underpin and support your positioning and your story that you've been saying or trying to say, but it never had legs because you didn't have anything to help you stand it up. And now you're like, hey, I've been saying that, remote selling is hard. And guess what? I have all these executives that lead sales teams that have found this to be true. And here's clips of them saying it. And hey, guess what? We surveyed 1,000, sellers. And guess what? 70% say it's harder to sell remotely than it is in person. And these kind of pillars of thought leadership just help you lift up what you're saying and add more legs and validity to it. And that can really be impactful in terms of believability and getting
Oh,
people to believe what
absolutely.
you're saying. And then, of course, that impacts the business.
I think that's the best part about thought leadership is it creates one, a bond, like you were talking about, and two, trust.
Yeah.
So when people have that need, it's like you're top of mind.
So I talked about this a bit, but a lot of the companies in my world, which is mostly B2B SaaS startups, they're really trying to nail their story and their positioning.
Yep.
And a lot of times the thought leadership comes into play here for reasons like I just said. And I know that you really try to help brands and the people within brands kind
Mhm.
of craft their story. So I'd love to
Yeah.
know, in your, experience, how do you craft a truly authentic and memorable story for a thought leader or a brand?
Good question. One, it's a great, I think that is the number one mistake probably most brands and individuals make is they start putting out thought leadership without really thinking about first and foremost what's our story, like what's our identity, what's our personality, what kind of content and talking points we want to put out there because it can be super broad. And I think companies and individuals don't narrow down their identity enough. They have an identity. I think most brands do identity work, but I think they don't differentiate themselves quite as much as they should before putting their thought leadership out there. So sorry, I had to go on that little tangent. I
I
think
love
it's such an
tangents.
important,
Fine. I go on
important
tangents all the
foundation.
time. I'm always down a rabbit
S-
hole.
So your question, how do you craft that memorable story?
Yeah.
What I take my clients through is whether it's, a team business or whether it's the founder or executives within it is doing that deep dive of, even as a brand, what do you stand for? You know, what's going to be your personality? What's going to be your perspective? I think our world demands more of our brands. They have to be value forward, purpose driven. So we go through value exercises. We narrow in on purpose and what you stand for, kind of some exercises. Sometimes it's group, team exercises. Sometimes it's one on one, looking at the audience where they really want to have impact. And then I actually personally write the stories for them. So I take what they say and kind of mirror back. And I like to say I kind of dare leaders and brands to do it differently. So I think I push the box a little and push them outside of the typical, corporate speak. That's I think one of the biggest things is their story is full of jargon, industry buzzwords, and eh, people are sick of that. They want to hear
Hmm.
something new and fresh and human.
Yeah. They don't want to hear that you're revolutionary or cutting edge or that your
Right.
platform was purpose built. They just want to,
Exactly.
yeah, they just don't want that. So strip away all that stuff. If you're writing a story or working on your positioning, strip it all away and just be real. Let it stand on
Right.
its
And
own.
as an individual, ditch the like chronological order bio,
Mm,
I'm so and so, here's my title, company, this is what I do. 20 years ago, I did this, or before that, I did this, and before that, it's most people's, story bios are very chronological. And that's people don't want to read that. They're going to fall
right.
asleep. So, how can you grab them in that first line of really powerfully stand for something or show your values or your passion to make them want to read more? And then, inject the credibility that you have.
Yeah, I love that. I have two friends who are really experienced tenured sales leaders, and they both recently asked if I would help look at their LinkedIn profile and help them kind
Yeah.
of zhuzh it up a bit. And I was thinking of taking a similar approach with both of them because they are kind of dry and chronological and second person. And that's also very common for people who don't work in marketing or maybe don't have a lot of
Yes.
experience with telling these kinds of stories. It's like, Erin does this. And it's like, well, no, like nobody, you're not hiring someone to like write about you and that, just be like, I feel this way. And I was thinking of
Yes.
taking a stance where at the top, it's like, I believe blank. And it's kind of just starting with this statement that's really true to you that's going to capture not everyone, but the right people that also believe that way. And they're looking to align with people that feel this way too. And then it's about the credibility piece. It's kind of your big wins, things that are, data driven, some numbers, that's important too.
Exactly. And that's a great way to start is I believe, like sharing, like you said, something that will grab the audience you really connect with. Because those
Yeah.
are those are going to be your dream clients too.
Oh
The
yeah.
people who will be turned off by that line are probably the clients that you cringe at and don't really want to be working with anyways. So we're just so much more than our titles and the companies we work for. And I think what grabs people is hearing that. I even do a little exercise in one of my trainings where I give everyone specific criteria of how they have to introduce themselves. Like they quick write a little intro and they have to meet these criteria. And then afterwards, I go around and have everyone say, what do you remember about someone else in the room? Every single solitary time I've ever done it, someone pulls out like, oh, I heard she was like living in Scotland for a long time, or she's a marathon runner, or it's never the title, the company, or, you know, what they do necessarily in their day to day job.
That's so interesting and fun. What a fun experience for people to go through and hopefully learn something new about their teammates that they didn't know because we don't always share the personal things, but we should.
No, and I think it just goes to show the things we latch on and grab our attention aren't our titles. It is really, how can I connect to this other person as a human?
Mhm.
And then you've opened up the door to really share your expertise as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great tip. Hopefully people that are listening can implement that. That's a great, I think, not only for a consultant working with clients, for, a manager doing some team building. That's a really great exercise. Have some criteria, go around the room and have people introduce themselves and then, you know, have
Oh, it's
people
super fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
super fun. So we're coming
And,
up on oh, sure, go ahead.
I was going to say, you can even carry that over into the reason I thought about that was the LinkedIn profile you were talking about is,
Yeah.
that header at the top of your LinkedIn profile. Don't just have your name or your title and company. You get so many characters nowadays up there. Add
Mhm.
something, what you're passionate about. And it can still be related to work. It doesn't have to be that you're a marathon runner or personal tidbit if you don't want to share it.
Yeah, I see some people, they'll talk about what they do professionally, then they'll say, dad of four or whatever it is, because then other parents might be more likely to reach out and mention that, like, oh, I see that's just like a nice, easy way to start a conversation that doesn't seem like you're DMing somebody to sell them something. It's like
Hmm.
a friendly way in. So the more personal
And
details you can share, the more comfortable people will be to reach out to you, right?
And even have fun I mean, it doesn't even have to some people are like, "Oh my gosh, no, I don't wanna share anything personally." So, you can also just have fun with what you do. I think I have somewhere on mine, daring leaders to show up differently.
Hmm.
So,
It's nice.
kinda more like, what do you stand for? What's that value, passion, personality?
I love it. So, unfortunately, we are coming up on time, and I have a few final questions that I would love to ask you.
Absolutely.
So, I need to know, in your opinion, which individual or company does a great job with their thought leadership?
There's so many oh my gosh, there's so many great and it depends what industry. Shameless plug for in the tech industry, I worked with a client who I just adore. Trisha Martinez. She's a managing director at Techstars. And her whole shtick is far out ideas that change the world.
Mm,
And she invests and mentors, advises companies that largely in deep tech that have, a purpose behind them. And I just love what she's putting out, the brand she's built. So she's a great one. In the marketing space, Anne Handley is amazing. Deloitte does a great job with their thought leadership around, humanizing the workplace and workplace well-being. So yeah, those are the ones that jump to the top of my head.
awesome. Anne Hanley and Deloitte, of course, I think a lot of people are familiar. Trisha might be a new one for people to go out and explore what she's been putting out. So I'm definitely going to go check out Trisha right after this call. So thanks for
She's
sharing.
she's just started kind of more her thought leadership platform, but she's a great example of how, you take just someone working in tech and investment. She's made it accessible, fun. She has a personality behind it, and you really understand her purpose. So yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing. So, last question. If you could leave our listeners with one word of advice or one tip, whether that's something professional or personal, what would that be?
Oh, what I would say is I love this quote: life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. It's by Helen Keller. And I think that's the way I live. And I think when you approach thought leadership in this context, it's a fun adventure. Just put your ideas out there. And it's amazing what feedback and impact you can have when you actually just start talking. So, and if, something doesn't resonate well, you know what? In this digital era, it comes and goes pretty darn quickly and disappears in, the world, our digital world.
Yes, don't delete your low performing posts. Nobody cares. Nobody's clicking on your profile, looking at how many likes you got. I know a lot of people when they start
Exactly.
putting their thoughts out there on social media, they have this feeling, this need to go back and delete something because it was an underperforming post. Don't do that. First of all, no one cares. No one's looking
Right.
except for you. Second of all, you want those analytics and those metrics so that when you're looking back 3, 6, 9 months later, you can see what resonated and what didn't so you can
Very
learn.
good point.
And then third, I've seen some posts do horrible for like the first 6 hours and then skyrocket and get a ton of traction. So you don't want to, give into your fear and your embarrassment and delete those underperforming posts for those 3 reasons.
Oh,
So
and I've had clients reach out to me on some of my least performing posts, and it resonated with them. And they specifically said, "This just caught my eye. It is so what I need, where I'm at. How can you help me?" So, yeah.
that's a great point too, because a lot of the posts that get a ton of traction, they're built to kind of attract a wider group of people, but they're not necessarily built to attract one tiny subset of people who is the one that really has that deep need and their kind of wallet open, they're ready to buy. And I found that too. And a lot of the people that have, purchased things for me or reached out to hire me, they're not the people that comment on all of my posts. So even if you're
No.
not getting those likes and those comments, you still have people consuming the content, building a relationship with you, building, demand if they are someone who's having, a deep need to make a change. So, yeah. So if I'd say if Laura and I can
No.
leave you with anything, listeners, be brave, don't
Mhm.
give in to your fear, and just own it. Put your ideas out there into the world and be vulnerable, be brave, and just let them exist.
And have fun with it.
Have fun with it. I mean, life's short, just like Helen Keller said. All right. So if our listeners would like to follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, Laura Fravel. You can pretty easily find me. And my website, laurafravel.com. And yeah, please, I'm always eager to connect, whether it be on LinkedIn or DM or email me.
Great. Well, thank you again. This has been a really great conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love talking thought leadership with you, Erin.
Well, have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Notorious Thought Leader. If you're looking for more stories from marketers who are generating demand from thought leadership, then visit us at motionagency.io/notorious. See you next time.